Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 17b, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. Oh, Lunor, am I so alone here, Hehe. Demeter giggled as she patted me on my arm, and Lunor Faust, the highest level adventurer of the Demeter Familia and a bounty hunter, only scowled to her goddess's pointed question. Yes, you are Lady Demeter, Lunor said, rolling her brown eyes, and then the blonde spun around and stomped back towards the kitchen, leaving Demeter to pout. Both Sechet and Hestia broke into laughter seeing Demeter's dejected expression before Hestia asked the more pressing question I was even curious about. Hey, so I and Belle got stuck here as we came in earlier, so what's even happening anyway? Demeter merely shrugged, and for a moment I wondered if I wanted to get closer to Belle and his nonsense before I firmly shut down those thoughts and decided to not volunteer the information that Hestia wanted. And seeing my not respond, Sechet threw me an imperceptible smile, and she herself didn't say anything as we all just settled in for a bit. Oi, what is the man of the hour doing with the chibi and Demeter? I heard Loki yell out, and I looked over to see Loki stomping over to me, and then the flat-chested goddess grabbed me by the lapels of my dress shirt. Help me get another slime gun. My damned brats encased it in molten stone and buried it in the Familia graveyard. Loki cried out, and I saw Lafia, who was given the thankless task of pulling the goddess back, blush as the gods of the room burst into laughter. Apparently the news about Riveria and Ace getting their clothes melted in public had spread. Ace's clothes really melted. Belle squeaked out, and a quick glance at the man showed him looking beet red at the thought. I'd rather not every woman in your Familia attempt to kill me, Loki, I said dryly, and then while Loki slumped in defeat at my clear refusal, Lafia pulled Loki off of me. But before Loki could be pulled all the way to the side of the restaurant, her executives had commandeered, Otter stood up with his chair loudly scratching against the ground, de-silencing the room as the king's pressure-filled room. Lady Freya will now speak, then Loki will speak, do not interrupt us. Just as we allowed you to join this event, which will strengthen Orario and its familias, you can also lose such a privilege. Otter spoke with his voice. Freya then stood up from behind her wall of adventures, and I even saw Mamma Mia standing on the edge of the bar, closer to her old goddess to show her support, I suppose. Gods and goddesses of Orario, we stand together on a rather interesting occasion. A mortal born with the abilities to create uncontrollable monster wrecks that can be killed and harvested at will has been found. Freya spoke grandly, and I felt every divinity in the room laser focus on Freya's words and not just her tits. The monsters are perfect for level 1s and 2s to fight in groups to earn high-quality excelia for level-ups and just generally gain large amounts of status points, and best of all, other than creating the item that spawns the bosses, the spawning of the monsters only requires the creator to make a couple of motions to summon them. Freya explained, and I frowned as she downplayed my actions. Now the best of all is that whoever does any amount of damage to the bosses will magically get a goodie bag full of materials and ready-made magical weapons and tools. Freya continued before she looked at me for a moment and smiled seeing my cool expression, and then she looked to Loki. Freya got the point of it all, so not much for me to say, Hehe, Loki said carelessly as she sat down beside Finn. Freya then nodded and her eyes went back to our table, and I felt her eyes jumping between me and Belle as though wondering which one she wanted to bite into first. So, Jake, the man of the hour and creator of these bosses, do you have anything you want to say? Freya asked, putting me on the spot. I nodded and stood up, ignoring the people whispering about how I was sitting next to Demeter. Thank you, Lady Freya, for hosting this party, and yes, I do have something to say. I will be hosting monster boss parties on the weekends outside the city of Orario, at one of the abandoned castles that line the countryside. I spoke, and I saw both Freya and Loki's smiles disappear as I stole all their momentum and control. All are welcome, that won't cause issues. My only job will be to spawn the bosses, as I have no control over the bosses. So, whatever happens, to any adventurers that try their luck isn't my responsibility. I continued, hearing nods from most of the adventurers. A hand clad in white and gold gloves rose up, and I looked over and saw Ermid Tizenair looking for my attention, and having my attention on her she spoke softly, but her voice easily carried over to me. The Dien Check Familia would like to set up a triage at the site to treat adventurers and sell potions for the boss battle, would that be alright? I nodded, obviously not going to turn down one of the best healers in this fantasy land. Then Hephaestus's Tsubaki Kalbrand volunteered to look into bringing some spare weapons and smiths to check up on people's weapons, and thus with other familias chiming in, even Hestia shyly raised a hand saying she could bring a snack cart over there. We might as well just have someone use their arcanum to stream the boss battles here in Rio rather than just running over to it every week. I heard another voice speak out, and thus came the great argument over how big such an event should become.